Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for Thriving Earth Exchange's Science with Purpose webinar. My name is Julia Genti. I'm the program manager for Thriving Earth Exchange's Community Science Fellowship Program. And today we're going to be discussing how scientists can help power community solutions. The structure of today's webinar will be roughly a 45-minute presentation on AGU and Thriving Earth Exchange and what it means to work as a volunteer scientist within our program. We'll then hear from two of our current volunteer scientists about the community science projects that they are supporting, and then we'll share some opportunities for you to get involved as well. We'll then conclude with a Q&A portion. And this webinar will be recorded and shared on the Thriving Earth Exchange website, but we'll end the recording at the start of the Q&A session. So please make sure you submit any questions that you might have via the Q&A feature on Zoom. And with that, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The American Geophysical Union, or AGU for short, is the world's largest association of Earth and space scientists. We have a global community of scientists and advocates to advance Earth and space sciences for the benefit of humanity and the environment. At AGU, we help scientists research and share societally relevant work with our 24 peer-reviewed journals and at our annual meeting of over 30,000 attendees. And of course, within the Thriving Earth Exchange program, just to name a few. Thriving Earth Exchange is AGU's flagship community science initiative. We are a fully virtual program that connects communities with resources, project managers, and scientific experts to address their unique environmental concerns. Our program was launched in 2013, and since then, we've trained over 1,500 people on how to effectively do community science. And we've launched over 360 projects in 14 countries, including 20 Spanish-speaking projects. Thriving Earth Exchange is really focused on giving communities access to the resources that they need to carry out a project with a clear and tangible local impact. Our projects are 18 months in length, which means that projects that are interested in applying must have a clear focus and vision for how it can be completed in this short time frame. And our projects are focused broadly on climate and Earth and space science related issues, but our work has focused on issues like testing soil and air and water quality, developing natural hazard mitigation strategies, mapping new or existing data using GIS software, and communicating research and data to communities. We are open to a wide variety of projects as long as they have a clear scope. And participating in our program helps build leadership skills for our participants. It helps shift the culture of science toward a model that is less exclusionary to communities and helps empower scientists to truly make a difference at the community level. Our program has three main roles in addition to Thriving Earth Exchange staff. There are community leaders, volunteer scientists, and community science fellows. We'll dive a little bit more into each of these in more detail later on in the webinar, but at a high level, community leaders are the crux of Thriving Earth Exchange. They represent their community and apply to our program with an idea for how a science-based project can help better their community. They ensure that the project has tangible, positive local impacts and work with their fellow Thriving Earth Exchange staff and their volunteer scientists to co-develop a project and support project implementation. The Community Science Fellow is a volunteer who serves as a project manager for a specific project. They make sure there is good communication between their project team and Thriving Earth Exchange staff, and that their project runs smoothly throughout its duration. And our community scientists are also volunteers who provide their expertise, their insight, and their resources to the project. They're really responsible for leading on the science part of the project with support from the community leader and the fellow. And they're someone who believes that science can contribute to solving real-world issues and someone who embraces community experience and expertise as relevant and important to long-term solutions. And of course, Thriving Earth Exchange staff are there at every step of the way for each project to help support project implementation, maximize project impacts after completion, and help troubleshoot any issues that might arise. So you've heard me say the word or use the term community science quite a few times, but what is community science? Community science is when scientists and community do science together to advance one or more community priorities. Community science really encourages communities, particularly historically marginalized and oppressed communities, to guide, participate in, learn from, and benefit from science. Every Thriving Earth Exchange project is unique and dynamic in their own way, but all of our successful projects share some major characteristics, which include them being collaborative and co-developed, having an effective and engaged project team, having a clear community impact, and enabling long-term community involvement after the project has been completed. Now we'll delve a little bit deeper into what a community science project team looks like. Thriving Earth Exchange projects are only as successful as the people on the project team. Within each Thriving Earth Exchange community science projects, there are 2 community leaders, 1 community science fellow, and a small team of experts. The number of scientists on a project are variable depending on the project scope, its intended outcomes, and the community's needs. Each member of the project team brings their own unique type of expertise to the project. The community leaders are the community expert. They bring community context, knowledge, insights, and connections. They live and or work in the community, and they may be paid through their organization, or they might volunteer their time as a concerned citizen. Community Science Fellows are the project manager. They guide the project team through the Thriving Earth Exchange community science process, ensuring communication and coordination amongst the team. They will always work remotely within the US or even internationally, and they are highly trained volunteers. They may be compensated through academic credit and or professional experience. And volunteer scientists are the scientific experts. They bring the scientific knowledge, insights, and connections to the project. They can either work in person or remotely, and they can be located within the community, within the same town, city, or state, or nationally. And they are lending their experience pro bono. They're volunteering within the project as it's most likely connected to their professional work. And thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Britt, who will go a little bit more into detail about each of these distinct yet important roles.
Thanks, Julia. Hi, everyone. I'm Britt Forsberg. I'm a coordinator for Community Science Fellow Engagement here at Thriving Earth Exchange. Julia's given a great overview of the roles, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about where each person comes from, and then we'll speak more specifically about the role of the volunteer scientist. So you've heard that community leaders bring their expertise. When we think about who can be a community leader, this is not someone who necessarily holds a formal role, although they might. Sometimes they have paid roles with nonprofits or city government, but a lot of times community leaders are coming directly from communities, someone who has noticed a problem and wants to do something about it. So they bring, again, their passion and their expertise on what is happening in their community every day. Again, their role, they bring the initial project idea. Sometimes that's very well developed. They know exactly what they need. And sometimes they know about the problem and they don't have the scientific background to know what the solution is. So this is where fellows can help develop that. And then again, as scientists, you provide your expertise as well. Community Science Fellows will work through all stages of a Thriving Earth Exchange project. They have a background in science. We require them to have at least a bachelor's degree. They're, again, working throughout the entire process. So scoping that project with the community, thinking, what are we trying to accomplish? What do we need? What steps are we taking to get there? And what scientific expertise is going to help us do that? They're responsible for matching the community with the scientist. So they'll take the feedback from the community about what the outcome they want to see is and what expertise they need. And we'll do some outreach to scientists looking for someone who has those skills, someone who has the time. Then they'll support the project through the solve phase. So being able to take that expertise and apply it directly to the issue. And then throughout the end of the project, making sure that they are sharing out the results with communities as well as with us at Thriving Earth Exchange. All right, so the heart of our webinar today, the volunteer scientists. So I mentioned they're recruited by the Community Science Fellow. So this means, again, the fellow is leading the outreach, looking for people. But they also must be approved by the community leader. So someone that community leader feels comfortable working with. Sometimes community leaders would like someone who has similar lived experience to them. Again, making sure that this project team is set up for success, that people are all comfortable and ready to move ahead. They're bringing their expertise and sometimes resources. This might be ability to test samples in your lab, sometimes against the knowledge of where else to do this. How much does it cost to test PFAS in water? Again, bringing the information that people without your backgrounds wouldn't know. But a project might have multiple scientists, so you are not responsible for everything in a project if it is working outside your area. So additionally, as Julia mentioned, volunteer scientists may work remotely or in person. It will depend on the project and what those project needs are. Sometimes there's sort of a middle ground where you might visit a community once to be able to demonstrate testing techniques, train the community members in on how to do some sampling, but primarily are working remotely. Again, it will depend on what the project needs and what you are able to contribute. We use the word volunteer scientist, but this is not necessarily someone who identifies as being a scientist for their job. Many of our volunteer scientists are graduate students. They're still working towards the degrees. Some of them are professionals working in industry, but then they may have degrees in STEM or other fields, again, depending on what that technical assistance is that the community is looking for. A common question we answer is about publicizing your results. Again, this can be informal or formal, and your work can result in publication. Some of our projects do, as long as the community is on board. They've agreed to it and you have recognized them as co-authors. All right, so a bit more about who our scientists are and what you might do if you decide to be a volunteer scientist with Thriving Earth Exchange. So again, our volunteer scientists might come from all career stages. They could be graduate students who are doing this as a part of their work. Maybe this is a learning or career development opportunity for them. Tenured faculty, retirees, or people who are outside of academia. Maybe they are research oriented or perhaps working in industry. Our scientists are global and diverse. In addition to the idea that we can work remotely and work anywhere, we do have these 20 Spanish-speaking communities that Julia mentioned, working in 6 different countries. Our scientists are also flexible and adaptive. So you might have an idea of what you think a project should do, but you don't get to walk in and just tell the community, this is the answer, right? You are listening to what their needs are. You're thinking about a solution that fits maybe not only their problem, but also what are their other constraints, right? Are there lower cost monitors you can use? Is there another way to get the information? So being able to think creatively and again, be flexible to what it is that that project is looking for. They may have come with one solution in mind, and then you can work with them to determine, is that the best or not? But above all, our volunteer scientists and all participants in our Thriving Earth Exchange projects are passionate and caring. They really want to know that they are making a difference. They want to be able to use their skills for good. So examples of work that you might do as a volunteer scientist. This could be collecting samples in the field, perhaps processing samples that community members have collected. So sharing your expertise, so guiding what could we do together. Sometimes it's analyzing existing data sets, or maybe helping find those data sets, interpret them. There's a lot of public data out there, but if you don't have a background in that particular field, you might not know what does it mean to have 2 parts per billion. Is that good? Is that bad? So being able to help explain that and then what might be the next steps for that community. At the end of your project, the community might ask for a report. Sometimes this is something they'd like to share with their community. Sometimes this is something that they want to share upwards. They'd like to take it to ask for policy changes. They'd like to ask for management changes where they live. And having this well-written report of the work you did and what you have found out can help them further those goals. Your community might ask for an action plan. What is it that we do next? What are the steps that we need to address this problem? Some communities come with really big problems that we can't solve all of in an 18-month Thriving Earth Exchange project. So helping them think of what are the next steps? What is it going to take to approach the whole problem? Your community might ask you for an interactive map. This might be like flood modeling. What are areas of our city that are more vulnerable, that are more likely to experience this? Sometimes overlapping those demographics of the city. So again, a tool that that community can use after this project is over. All right, just a couple of resources and opportunities for scientists, and then we will hear from our special guests. So I've mentioned that we at Thriving Earth Exchange do support publishing as long as it's something that your community leads want, that they feel comfortable with their information being out there, with their community being identified. And so as a part of AGU, we can do this in a couple different ways, some that are more or less formal. So we at Thriving Earth Exchange manage our own blog, our own communications. We are always happy to share out project results or sometimes even just achievements mid-project with our audience that way. We're also connected to Community Science Exchange. So this is a two-part resource. One is the Community Science Exchange Hub. So this is a place that you could post maybe a case study. It could be the methods that you've used if you think that would be helpful for another community. That is, the hub is not peer reviewed. You can contribute whatever you think might be useful to other people. There's also the Community Science Journal that is connected to that is peer reviewed. And so you and your community leads and your fellow could write up your results and you could publish there. We also, of course, if you are familiar with AGU, you know about the annual meeting last year in Washington, D.C. with 31,000 people coming together to share their science. So that's another great place that you can promote the work that you've done and really push out the impacts of that project further. So finally, we have some tips to engage with communities, and these stand if you are or are not participating with a Thriving Earth Exchange project. But the first tip we have is to establish trust. You might feel that your credentials are very strong in your field, but you can't just walk into a community and instantly tell them what you think they should do. There's going to be time that you need to build relationships to make sure that they trust you, that they're willing to share their information with you, right? And give you access sometimes to things that you need, that everyone is comfortable and really being honest with each other. So the first couple meetings that you have with a community, you might not talk about solutions. You might not talk about methods, right? This is your time to really understand the project and just understand the need in the community. We also advise everybody to be flexible. There are things that maybe work in your day-to-day life in your lab, but again, you're working with real people with real solutions and real constraints. So listening to your community leaders about what you think the best solution is. Next, communicate openly and often. A lot of times communities are coming to Thriving Earth Exchange who've had really bad experiences where maybe research has done about them, to them, on them, and they've never been told about it. Or studies have been done already on the hydrology of the area, but they've never heard about them. So making sure that you are clear and transparent with your community. We also advise you to keep an open mind. Again, not walking in that you know the best thing to do, but you are listening. What is it that is really going to benefit that community? Similarly, to value local knowledge. You can know everything about a scientific discipline, but the people who live there are the people who experience this every single day, and they are the experts on their experience. They are the experts on how those problems are manifesting locally. To start small, but think long-term. We've described Thriving Earth Exchange projects as 12 to 18-month projects. And again, this can't always address everything that is happening in a community. So a Thriving Earth Exchange project is often just one step in addressing these broader goals. So being able to think, what is it that we can do now? What might come next? What would it take to take those next steps? And be able to provide that information to communities. We encourage all of our participants to build lasting partnerships. So just because a Thriving Earth Exchange project is complete does not always mean that you walk away and you never see these people again. Right, there's still work that can be done, and we've had some really strong relationships come out of these projects. And then finally, if you would like to publish, make sure that you are doing this with community approval, that any of the data you collected together, any of the information that identifies their community, that all of this is done with permission. And again, you have invited the other members of your team to be co-authors. And this is not just I'm doing an academic thing kind of for you about you, but that we are doing this together because we think it's really important to share this information. With that, I'm really excited to introduce our volunteer project scientists to tell you about the specifics of their project and a little bit about what they value about being part of Thriving Earth Exchange. So we'll hear from Caroline Frischman as well as Lisa Nguyen. But with that, I'm really excited to turn the floor over to Caroline.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Caroline. I'm a graduate student at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I was a community scientist on a project in Pascagoula, Mississippi, where we assessed industrial pollution and health impacts to assist their goals for a community buyout. So I've been working with the Cherokee Forest neighborhood for, I think it's 3 years now. The Thriving Earth Exchange program has ended, but just to give you kind of context around the community. So it was based in the Cherokee Forest subdivision in Pascagoula, which is highlighted in or red in this map. And you can see all surrounding it to the east is a huge industrial park that has a refinery, a shipbuilding yard, a Superfund site, a gas processing plant, and a few other industries. I took this picture on the right when I'm standing in the street, one of the streets in the neighborhood, looking through some trees, and you can see a ship that's being repaired in the shipyard, and then beyond that, there's a little orange dot, and that is a flare from the refinery. So the folks are living in really close proximity to heavy industry, and that's led to a lot of odor reports and health impacts, a little subset of which is shown from this survey in 2021. So the community is really concerned about the pollution impacts. They are working towards a buyout of their community, and so the project goal for the Thriving Earth was to look at data, which we can go to the next slide and I can show a little bit of the data. But yeah, our goal was basically to organize the data that's already been collected in the community and then identify gaps going forward to try to better understand the impacts in the community. So the state agency in Mississippi had already done some monitoring, so the community, but it's really hard to put context around that data without having a scientific background and a air monitoring background. So this is just some screenshots of that data, and you can imagine it would be very hard to understand what that means just with a table of numbers given from the state. And so we worked to put some context around that. We had an awesome team of I have a background in air monitoring, and then we also had I'm a atmospheric modeling expert, Dr. Kathy Duderstadt at the University of New Hampshire, and then two community members, Barbara and Leah, who could provide a lot of context to what it is like living in the community. And then Jennifer Crossland is a community organizer who lives near Pascagoula, and she was really helpful for thinking about how we share our findings more broadly and educate the community. And I will say I was kind of nervous joining because I do have a background in air monitoring, but it's very different than the data the state had collected. And so I was sort of worried. I didn't know if I was going to be all that helpful. And I think that might be common jumping into community science. So I just kind of wanted to bring it up that once you get out of the very siloed academic settings that we sometimes find ourselves in, I found that our knowledge is really not as niche, I guess, as it can sometimes feel. So we added context with our outcomes, and I can show that. Yeah, so we had a few different, I'm just gonna highlight some of the things we did. The first was a health impacts report. So Jennifer brought up that if we're, we can put in a lot of effort to understanding the air monitoring data, but if we're not educating the community on what the impacts are, there's only so much that's going to do. So we made a health impacts report that shared some of the impacts of the different pollutants we know are in the neighborhood. And this was really helpful. People brought it to the doctors to start conversations. Oops, I just turned off my camera by accident. For people that had had ongoing issues to start a conversation. I'm not sure why I can't get my camera back on. Sorry, maybe it'll come back. But ongoing issues and hadn't ever talked to their doctor about the possibility of pollution contributing to those issues. So they were able to bring those reports to them. We also looked through the data, like I mentioned. These are 4 samples of sulfur dioxide that the state collected. And the state used that data to say that the air was clean, which when I plotted it in comparison to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, it became very obvious that sulfur dioxide really is a concern in the community. And so, yeah, in that case, having some scientific background to know what standards we should be these to and what the levels should be was really helpful for the community to then go back to the state and say, no, this is a real concern for us. And then the last outcome I'll share was based on the testimonies from Barbara and Leah, the community members. Dr. Kathy Duderstadt was able to do some modeling to show that when this was a intense pollution event, so when the community members were reporting pollution, modeling showed that that was when the pollution would be traveling into the community based on wind direction. And then when the reports weren't of pollution weren't as strong, was also aligning with when the wind would be taking the pollution away from the community. In this particular event, Sunday was also when the state came in response to reports of pollution to do monitoring, and then they, didn't find any pollution, and said that things were okay. Which, with this modeling, then the community can say, well, you came on the day that the pollution was not there. It doesn't mean that there's other days when the wind is coming from the direction of industry. So that was really helpful. And then so now, like I said, the text program has officially ended, but I'm still the whole team is still working together. And I think that's, to me, the best part of exchange is how it really plants seed for communities and scientists to get to know each other and then continue beyond the original project. So now I'm on the technical advisory panel for a different project that the community got funded. So that's picking me with the whole technical advisory panel. And then we also applied for funding from my university to do some monitoring to fill one of the gaps that we saw from our analysis within Thriving Earth. And we were able to capture pollution spikes that were occurring in the community that had been missed with monitoring across town. That project got some publicity in the state, which was really helpful for the community because they're trying to get their story out more broadly. And that also connected me with another community in Mississippi that I'm now working with. And it's not a Thriving Earth project, but I find myself kind of modeling it the same way, where we're taking some time to get to know each other, learn about the community's concerns, their capacity, what they've already done, what data is already there. They're learning about what I do and what the skills that I can bring, and then we're gonna eventually apply for a grant to do a bigger project. But I feel very grateful for the Thriving Earth to have given me this opportunity to sort of go through this process once, and now I find myself repeating it outside of Thriving Earth, but with other communities I'm getting connected to. So I'm very grateful for the program and happy to answer questions. We finished the rest of the webinar, so thank you.
Hello? Hi. Can everyone hear me? Okay. My name is Lisa Nguyen. I'm also a volunteer scientist with Thriving Earth Exchange. Thank you very much, Carolyn, for being here. Thank you all for being here. So my project is on sort of mitigating illegal trash dumping and environmental education at this church in Detroit, Scott Church. So I want to sort of emphasize that like we work in a team. So I'm speaking as a scientist, but we really make all our decisions together as a team. So we have our community leaders who propose the project. Delaney, my friend Delaney and I are scientists, and then Lily's sort of like the manager. Um, so a little bit about me, that's me in the middle. I'm an applied physics PhD student at University of Michigan. I study the impacts and drivers of drought and have a background in data science and particle physics and used to work at a postal annex. And I guess the moral of the story is that you might think you don't have the skill sets necessary, but if you're willing to learn and open to opportunities, it's a really good way to volunteer. Like people are always happy to have volunteers, and there's a lot of opportunities that you can sort of get to. So I actually got into it. I was just receiving an email from my department asking for interest, and I didn't really have any experience with like trash mitigation or environmental education, but I had a willingness to learn. And so I think that is ultimately like what they're looking for. And I really did want to work in something that was like like Kellen said, I think you can like really abstract your science away from real world impacts. And it's just a good idea to sort of look into community needs, and it can inform my science just as much as like I can help with them. So the project is twofold. The problem is Scott Memorial Church. It's in a kind of low income area, predominantly Black, pretty expensive trash fees, and people just have a lot of trash they don't know how to get rid of. And so they just sort of dump it in like public spaces and like at the church. So this really puts a burden on the church, which already has sort of an older congregation. It's like so the first part was what are like land use changes that we can do to mitigate illegal trash dumping. The second part was a sort of environmental education component, like how can we sort of share out environmental sort of needs that may help the community and empower these things, because it's really hard to prioritize environmental issues when there's so many other factors like burdening the community. So just giving them like we want to empower these communities to be safer and cleaner, and just giving them that knowledge, I think is just really useful. So as for solutions, for the first part, the trash mitigation part, it's very varied. Like we essentially were like, what are land use changes that we can make to sort of increase like barriers for people to dump, and also like increase people's like pride in the area. So anything from increased lighting, more recycling bins, like physical blockades, signs. And a big one I think is like beautification. It has like a secondary impact of making people like prideful and investing in their community. And it's been well shown that when you have more investment, you take more ownership of it. And this is actually why Detroit has initiated like a citywide beautification effort. It's really, really exciting to see. So we've implemented these things. We're gonna make a mural. And the second part is the environmental education portion. So we're going to host two events. The first one is the recycling workshop. And it was really great. We like utilize an organization that already existed called Green Living Science, and they host free workshops. So we hosted a recycling workshop just to tell them about small ways that they can help out a little bit in like just giving them local knowledge. and making small changes in your everyday life to sort of help with waste and energy. The second workshop that we were going to put on is just to unveil the mural. So we had a mural done by a local artist, and she's currently working on it right now. So we are going to have a mural unveiling as well as an environmental justice panel. So we'll like connect with sort of local university professors and to talk about, you know, how environmental issues tend to disproportionately affect low-income communities, just from trash, urban heat, waste management, park facilities, and how these can like really bleed into like economic and social costs. And so it's really good to like inform communities of this. So this will be like done throughout the community. And I guess what I want to emphasize here is that solutions will really vary on how you first envision them to be. So it's really good to be open and think out of the box and reach out to your network. So I just have a few more points. So I say my contributions, but I want to emphasize that they're not really my contributions. This is really a team effort. So, but these are things you could possibly do in a Thriving Earth project. So the scoping of the problem, that can be anything from literature review, like meeting with the team, talking to people in the community, really understanding like what they want and like what is feasible. Yeah, so the next one is deciding what's feasible. Like you can come in having like all these ideas, but you really need to understand like what the stakeholder wants. In this case, it was the church, and like what they can like support and what they cannot support. And like we've sort of brushed on this earlier, but it's really quite interesting because I feel like you can really like a real world solution is like definitely a lot grittier than your perfect, I don't know, science solution. And then the next one is utilize like existing infrastructure. So search out, like there are so many like opportunities and sort of like city grants and programs and reaching out to your network. Like I brought Delaney on because she was a friend I knew from undergrad who's like a graphic designer. And, you know, we didn't know if we wanted a graphic designer at the start, but we were thought if we want like infographics to like give to the community so they could take home and put on their fridge, that's like great. Because kind of like recycling can be really confusing, honestly. So yeah, I would just make sure to like really look at existing infrastructure that's already there. So some lessons learned. The first one is be adaptable. Like all the solutions, like not everything is going to go perfectly, but if you're adaptable, you're going to have a successful project. The second one is rely on your network. There's so many people you can tap in to help. And fundamentally, I feel like people really do want to help, but they don't know how. So if you make it easier for them to just volunteer and you ask them, it's like there's just a wealth of resources you can tap into. The always check in with your community, make sure that you guys align on like what the project like needs and what the community wants. And always communicate with your team. It's really a team effort. And then the last one is just to have fun. Yeah, so I also just want to add the reason I got into this is not just because like I can benefit, like I can help them, but I really feel like my science has benefited from them and thinking more from a local perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you, yeah, for sharing about the amazing work that you've done for your communities and the just invaluable lessons that you've learned along the way. Now that we're reaching the end of our webinar and you've heard about some of the specific work that our program is doing and that our scientists have been up to, I'll share a little bit more about how you can get involved with Thriving Earth Exchange. First, take the time to think about whether you are a text-ready scientist. Text-ready scientists are those who are willing to volunteer their time, energy, and resources to the majority of an 18-month project. They're folks who listen actively and believe that science can contribute to solving real-world problems, even while recognizing that science alone is rarely enough to address these issues that communities are facing. They are people who embrace community experience and expertise as relevant and important to long-term solutions. They're people who can articulate clearly about how their expertise and experience relates to a community priority. They are people who have interest and or experience in working with communities. They're people who have an interest in building science communication skills and sharing their expertise with non-scientists. And they are people who are earth and space scientists engaged in the issue of climate change, natural hazards, natural resource management. They're willing to share their work and its impact more broadly, and they can commit to the Thriving Earth Exchange process and all of its outcomes. And if all of these characteristics sound like you, then you are certainly in the right place. So how can you get involved as a volunteer scientist? Well, the two best ways to do this are one, to sign up to our volunteer scientist list. This is a database of scientists who have opted in to working on a potential Thriving Earth Exchange project. Our fellows use this database to find and connect with experts to match to their project. So this is a really invaluable resource that we rely on quite often for our projects. And thank you to Britt for throwing that into the chat. The second way is by scanning this QR code on the right-hand side of the screen, which takes you to our current opportunities page on our site. This page houses all of the projects who are currently looking for scientists or experts. So they're actively recruiting folks to join their team. And you can apply directly to a specific project if one is of interest to you, or you can reach out to our team to ask questions about any given project. And you also should feel free to connect with Thriving Earth Exchange and AGU on social media to just learn more about upcoming opportunities and get engaged with us. And speaking of upcoming opportunities, we will be co-hosting another webinar with the editors of AGU's Community Science Journal to share about how scientists can get academic credit for their community science work. This webinar is taking place on October 1st from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can scan the QR code on the right side of the screen to be taken to the registration page for that. And with that, thank you all for your time. We'll now be transitioning to Q&A, and we'll be stopping the recording. But if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to reach out to the team via email at thrivingearthexchange@agu.org. Thank you.